So the gifts of the five are wisdom, clarity, and non-attachment. So think about that. That's what they're bringing to a conversation is they're going on facts, they're going on knowledge, and their only attachment is to the the wisdom itself, the knowledge itself.
This season on the Living Out Love podcast, we are focusing on you, who you are, what motivates you, what you're here to contribute, and how you can expand. We'll be utilizing my leadership skills and spiritual connection, diving deep into the Enneagram and astrology. Listen every week to become intimately aware of yourself. Only then can you heal and grow. Let's get to work, loves. Hello, loves. Welcome back to our series on the Enneagram. I am joined, as always, by my lovely parents, Dana and Stephanie Foy, who are certified Enneagram practitioners. And this week we are talking about the Enneagram 5. And so, Dad, why don't you kick us off with some example fives?
Okay, so some famous fives. I want to start with a fictional character, Sherlock Holmes. A lot of people know of Sherlock, have seen movies about him. And how he sets him apart as a five is number one, he was independent. He works primarily alone with an assistant. He's able to look deep into detail, place things together, make things make sense that get past the normal other policemen, detectives. So that's an example of the Enneagram 5 people. In terms of famous musicians, Johann Sebastian Bach was a five, and he was very independent. He was able to, by himself, sit down and work out and understand very complex music and do it rather quickly. He was known for creating music on the spot when somebody needed to do something. However, he was a shy man. He loved the music part. He didn't like to be in media and out front. People make a big deal out of it. His talent was making fact. Back in the day, he was known more for his organ playing composition. Now, very few people know it. In terms of famous actors, Alan Rickman, very popular, was a five. And Christopher Walken, a gentleman a little bit older than me, may not be known to all the generations, but he is a five. So I don't know many fives because they're very private. They're very independent, and they're not really too anxious about being in the media. Of course, there's a couple actors, Alan Rickman and Christopher Walken, but I think they did it on their terms. I think they chose to be actors, and I think maybe perhaps they stepped back in between like Bach did. So that is a short list. Rooney Mara is one that's a contemporary of some of the people. She was famous for the movie Girl with the Dragon.
Well, and I skipped a step when I asked you to talk about the people because how do we refer to fives? Like 4 was the intense creative. How do we refer to a 5?
The quiet specialist.
Quiet specialist. Ooh, that has a nice vibe to it.
Yeah, I think that further describes, Bach and wanting to stay behind the scenes. And then working independently.
So by specialist, is that like indicative of a person that once they find a thing that they dive into that thing?
Yes, they want to go deep and they want to gain a lot of knowledge and wisdom about a thing, but that doesn't mean they're going to necessarily stay with that thing because they are unconventional thinkers and they like to go as much as they like to go deep in a subject, they also like to go broad. So but they do that because they're fiercely independent and they really want to just kind of be left alone. So they have time and energy to devote to these this matters of thought and what they want to be exploring in their own ideas and heads.
And they like doing it. It's something they enjoy doing.
Because one of their traits is curiosity, inventiveness, and they are unsentimental and self-sufficient. So you can see how that sets them up to be in this with the motivation to understand. Like that's their motivation to understand whatever it is that's going on. So I'll just jump ahead a little bit. Think about an SP5, a self-preservation 5 is going to need to understand what's going on with themselves and the world and how do they show up and looking deep inner life. SX5s want to go deep in understanding relationship to others. One of the people that we all know who is a therapist is a 5, SX5. And it's not surprising. It's like, oh, that really makes sense to me. Now, what most people would not think about a 5 being a therapist because they're typically more feeling centered. You might think about a 2 as a therapist. You might even think about it as a 4 as a therapist. But when you put on the lens of the need to understand and to go deep in that understanding, oh, that sort of now makes sense in terms of this person as a therapist. And then SO5s, they're seeking to understand sort of the bigger social issues, the bigger conceptual things. So, what are the impacts of the global issues, the global warming and the social strife and all that? That's where a 5 would end up.
They're also not real big on energy, personal energy. They have a tendency to be tired more than others. That they reserve their energy. They're concerned about, am I going to run out of energy before the day is over? And so you'll see them uh, needing rest. Uh, like some 5s I know, they actually, when they plan their day, they they have how much energy they have in mind. They're very, very guarded about getting beyond what they schedule because they think they're just.
That, in a way, that makes sense because we've done the proverbial we've done studies on like mental energy and how many calories you burn when your brain is highly engaged. So if these are people that are thinking all the time, that burns a lot of energy in the mental sense. And so that wouldn't leave you a lot of energy for.
Well, and also from um, from an emotional standpoint, like every handshake, every hug, every interaction with another person depletes the 5s. Whereas another type would get energy from the exchange. So
Yeah.
it's every one of those things takes away from them. So they're having to manage all that. Like one 5 I know, it was interesting. We were having a debrief and she was talking about that she really needed to show up at this. It wasn't even going to be really big, probably less than 15 people, less than 15 other women for a social thing that was going to be whatever. And she said, I just don't know if I can do it. She goes, I really need to. And I said, well, is there a way for you to create time for yourself? Like, could you have some quiet rest time before you need to get ready to go to this thing? And then can you limit? She goes, oh, I always have to limit myself on these activities. She said, I never stay for the whole thing. She said, you'll never see me at the end of any party. I'm always gone. I was like, so anyway, it was just interesting. It was like, okay, just anticipating that this was something, and this was like a day or two away, that she needed to plan for having the energy to go attend this social function that was going to, require her to be in the midst of a number of people.
I'm really intrigued by the idea of energy and how much we have and don't have because my husband and I are both 2s, but he's a social 2 or an SX2. I don't remember, but either way, he gets energy from interactions, whereas I feel drained by them, but because we're different subtypes.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious, are there other types as a whole? Because you're saying that all fives are energy, need to be
Limited.
energy aware and sensitive.
Yeah.
Are there other numbers that are similar to that?
In terms of low or high, which
Either way, it's interesting either way. What are the low energy numbers?
low energy numbers are nines and fives. Those are the two lowest. And then
I had to guess about high energy. I'd say it's 3, 8, and 1.
well, think about sevens.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And then within each number, there's probably some variance among the types. Okay.
I would say some sixes are probably energy challenged. So I'm going to say six, nines, and five. Fours, I'm not so sure.
So it depends. Because remember, fours have a lot of energy for emotions. They can just go with their emotions until cows come home. So, but now do they have energy for social exchange? That's a whole nother, dimension. So, but fives in general, on all dimensions, are looking to conserve their energy.
And on the, like as a 2, I'm thinking repressed.
Yes.
And I'm good at the feeling and the doing. So fives. So fives are thinkers, and where are they repressed? Yes, more feeling, but that's a
Yeah, they tend to think and act, and feel is comes later, because they're going to think their way through their feelings.
right. Yeah. Interesting. So, talk to me about, I don't know, I just feel like I haven't fallen in love with the 5 yet, you know? And
Okay, I
every
can
time we do one
tell.
of these episodes, I get to like a place of, oh, the
Yeah.
number. So I'm not there yet because that's such a different being than me. I wish I was in my head more, but I'm not in my head. Um, so what would the world be missing if we didn't have fives? Like,
Okay, so the motivation of the five is to need and understand and make sense of the world. That's what motivates. And their focus of attention is going to be on conserving resources. They feel like on the energy, they're going to have to be conservative as they're learning and studying. It takes a lot of energy out of them, I guess, all the reasons. So they like to build knowledge and understanding, and maintain boundaries around themselves. They don't want to look foolish. And their social style is withdrawn. How they get what they want is to do a lot of thinking and get insight and gain knowledge. And they get really energized by going in their heads. And when they get in conflict, the way they get out of it is they show their competence. They're going to show up and say, "This is the correct way to do this." So that's very different from the twos. Don't think. Twos act and feel. Thinking's not there. Well, the five is kind of opposite from that. They're going to do a lot of thinking before they take any. I think that's why some of us, and I just don't know many fives. That is another thing that makes it difficult for me to get my head around how they are. And so, what would the fives be missing? What would we be missing?
So let's talk about their gifts. So the gifts of the five are wisdom, clarity, and non-attachment.
oh, I like that one.
So think about that. That's what they're bringing to a conversation. Is they're going on facts, they're going on knowledge, and their only attachment is to the wisdom itself, the knowledge itself. Now they will defend that knowledge. They want to be right. They want to know more than everybody else in the room on any given subject. And if they don't know more, they're likely not to engage. So what you can count on from the 5 is if they bring something to a team, an organization, or whatever, it's like, okay, they're going to bring content knowledge beyond what most people would be willing to invest their time in. So if you need deep understanding about an issue, if you need somebody to research something relative, now, what you have to do if you want to utilize a 5 well is you got to put some boundaries around them. You got to give them some time, because otherwise, and there's never enough. There's always more information. So you have to say, okay, we need your recommendation by X, or we need you to make a decision by Y, or come to us with a solution by such and such, because they'll just keep going and going and going. So that's the value of a 5, is to bring that depth of knowledge and wisdom and clarity to any problem sort of at hand.
I think between the fact that they're not naturally social and that they're also private, it's hard. It's like hard to imagine them because I don't really know them.
Well, and also, so they're almost like opposite of 2s, because they also, you 2s trade on your feelings, and theirs are all feeling repressed. Theirs are all buried underneath their thinking. So it's like, where do we connect?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So probably other people get it and I just don't get it.
Well, yes.
All right. So, what are the 5s? They're good at thinking, they're good at diving deep, they're good at working alone, they're unconventional thinkers. And by that, you don't mean necessarily countercultural. You just mean unconventional in the way of like different. Is that correct?
It could be countercultural. It could be, they're just going to go, into whatever they're thinking about. It's just going to be broad. It's going to be, so.
Okay. So what shadows do they have to navigate? What are their vices?
One of the vices, avarice, is holding on to things or gathering too much. They may have a tendency to gather knowledge sake for the sake of having it, and then not sharing it. Tendency to hoard things because they're in their mind, their currency is what they know. They're not always going to be willing to turn loose. Stephanie, you want to add to that?
So I think when you think about, if you think about the person who goes deep in information, they can come across as sort of the know-it-alls.
Hmm.
The sort of, and their way that they explain things to others can feel like they're patronizing, or like, uh, um, it makes, in some cases it makes it hard for other people to engage with them, because they they've got, their perception is, I know everything, and I know about this subject and you don't know about this subject, so therefore you need to just listen to me. And so some people feel shut out, shut down by them.
And I think sometimes the 5 struggle to communicate and listen, uh, and be kind of awkward socially because they're so into their thinking and their research, they don't into their feelings. They don't quickly on their own actually connect easily with other people. Now, in our Enneagram classes, I've seen the 5s come together at the 5 table, and they love each other. They click, they talk, but when they go to the other tables, they seem to talk less than the other numbers. And I've had the 5 say they feel most comfortable, and one of the reasons why they came to the classes, they could be with others, relax, understood each other. So I think it's difficult being a five because the rest of us, well, this is stereotypical, maybe I should say that, are more used to being social, more used to sharing knowledge, and uh, and not necessarily, like I have to go deep with somebody in a conversation. I can talk about something, be about something, not think that I have to deep dive or be responsible for knowing more. I can just enjoy uh, the other person because I'm not having to be smart. I'm having to be me. And I think I'm not now. I'm making this up. I perceive that my fives may have some pressure on them because they expect themselves to know and do more and be right. And so anyway, just the, I think they're socially challenged because of my beliefs. I don't know what you think
Okay.
about this, Stephanie, but that's how I perceive.
I think it's just, yeah, whatever. It's a whole need for privacy. It's a whole the tendency to withhold themselves, you know, energetically, so it's yeah, it can put them in an awkward spot.
So what triggers a five? I remember very clearly when we did the threes, like setting them up for failure. Like that's gonna trigger. So what triggers a five?
Being overwhelmed or surprised, that is one. Private information being shared.
Oh,
They don't want people sharing their personal information about themselves, their life.
what if I shared my personal information?
It's okay, but it's not that would be fine with them. Probably not that interesting to tell you the truth for them.
Yeah, yeah,
You know,
yeah.
um,
But it probably be preferred to not talk personal things,
um,
or is that too strong a assumption?
I don't know that that matters as much to them,
Okay.
um, unless that happened to be an area where where their curiosity had clicked in about other people. Then they would be interested in that because that's what they're curious. So you see where
Right.
I'm going with that?
Yeah, yeah.
I don't think I believe they need that to connect with
Right.
you. Some types like to share themselves and be vulnerable. That's how they connect, how they become close. I don't think fives necessarily. They can connect with you more on an intellectual level,
That's
emotional,
wild to
touchy
me.
feeling. That's how I interpret it. Now, dishonesty and false information
Oh, yeah. That makes sense.
and being prompted for an instant emotional response. They don't have time to think it out or what their true feeling is about something. Ask them to feel right here and now. It makes them uncomfortable.
Yeah. That I get that makes sense to me. Now that we've connected it to feelings, I'm like, "Oh, okay, I can get it." So, you said surprise earlier, and it made me think because I'm a self-preservation, a lot of things come back to safety for me that I'm now learning don't come back to safety for other people. So, I assume for self-preservation fives, being surprised comes back to safety. Would you say that for the other subtypes as well?
I think it's a question to me. Again, it's kind of like um, there's an element of surprise when you're fully engaged in curiosity. You're willing to, like we used to talk about, oh, be curious, be willing to be surprised. So I think in some regards, they're fine as long as they defined it as part of what they're curious about. Now, if you surprise them with something that's not in their realm of curiosity, then that's probably uncomfortable. So, I think with any of the subtypes of type 5.
And with so we kind of talked about this element of time where expecting them to have an emotion right away would be triggering for them. In general, because I'm kind of imagining, I relate to being a hermit, but I'm kind of imagining them as a bit of a hermit type. do they need, if they're private and they can do things on their own, do they need a lot of time just for the thinking? Like, like they don't necessarily think quickly, or they don't want to be rushed, I guess is what I'm saying.
Well, they want to have time to develop their whole thoughts. I mean, think about Sherlock Holmes and Dad's original thing. He didn't jump to quick judgments. That was what set him apart as a detective. He was willing to follow the strings of a case and work it through and be curious and keep, so whereas some others would go, oh, it was the husband. The husband did it. He'd be like, I don't know, so taking the time to explore fits with a five so they come to a resolution.
All right, I'm starting to fall in love. We're getting there. We made a lot of
Okay.
progress. So, are we ready to move on to, or no, let me ask one more question. Like we talked about defense mechanisms and blind spots.
Mm-hmm.
So we talked about the triggers. Did we cover, I guess, defense mechanisms, blind spots?
Okay, isolation, defense mechanism, drawing from the world and detaching from others in order to sort through their thoughts and emotions without interference. That's it. Other is compartmentalization, separating thoughts from emotions, over controlling the boundaries that separate events. Or is effort to rationalize. That's the two primary defenses: isolation and compartmentalization.
And then earlier, Dad, you mentioned that it's your belief that they don't necessarily know how they come across socially. Would you put that as a blind spot?
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm in relation. I have a relationship with a couple of fives, and and I'm a nine, and we're so different. I don't think the fives in a relationship realize how difficult it is to connect with. And it's interesting is I find out later that I have connected with, but I couldn't tell it.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
something happens. A lot of time passes,
Yeah.
and so yes, they're difficult for me to connect with. Now, your mother may have a totally different experience. She's free, uh, more active and doing things, and I'm a more emotional feeler, so I don't think they know how difficult they are to connect with. I really don't. That's my perception. And what do you think?
I'd probably agree. I mean, to me, they're just sort of aloof. We might
Yes.
describe them a little bit as aloof, and it's not. And it's because we anticipate that people are going to have some warmth about them or some
Yes.
whatever, and they're that's not likely to be how they're going to show up. Um, so
So it sets me at. I'm not always at ease around him because I don't know how warm or friendly, or am I making am I embarrassing myself here, or I'm just being me and I can't worry about it.
But let's think about the positive sides of the five. Their emotional detachment and their ability to compartmentalize says they'd be good in a crisis. They are great if they work in an environment where they could work on individual tasks. They, not that they can't be part of a team, but if they have uninterrupted time and they have solo tasks to work on, they they can be very successful. Um, if we think about a change process, if we engage fives in thinking systemically, they have that capacity to think broader and systemically about how to uh, implement some sort of change process. Now they have to be convinced that the change is needed, and that the results will be what they think they should be. Um, but they can bring, analysis and insight, because, where does insight come from? Well, there's, you know, insight comes from wisdom, from understanding, and then applying that to get to some new level of insight. So they can bring that to a project, to a team, to a situation. Um,
So I think I got a handle on the 5. The wings for a 5 are going to be 4 and 6. 4 we covered recently with intense creative.
Yes.
That's a wild wing if you're if you're a 5.
Yeah.
And I think it's funny, like looking at the Enneagram symbol itself, the 4 and the 5, there's that space between.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like the 4 is the most intense, feeler, and the 5's the most intense thinker, and they're both like grounded down there, but kind of worlds apart.
Yeah.
So, and then we haven't talked about 6 yet. So what's the 6 called?
6 is called loyal skeptic.
Okay. That sounds like that'd be buddy buddy with a 5.
Yeah.
Yeah,
They're
it
going to
does.
be, I would say, if you would think about how most people talk about, I'm a something with a so-and-so wing, you probably hear more people say I'm a 5 with a 6 wing than you're going to hear people say I'm a 5 with a 4 wing. But if they could learn to use both those wings, that 4, the emotionality of the 4 would just could skyrocket the 5, because what we've all said about the ability to connect with 5s, if they could learn to have emotional availability with other people, then a lot of what they have to offer, the wisdom, the clarity, the insight, could go much further, because people would be more receptive to it, more receptive to them and to what they have to share. So,
well, and the nature of the 4 to be creative would only enhance the already curious mind.
right.
Also, it's interesting. And so,
what's interesting also, this is a thing from out of the report, that high integration with the 4 can take the 5 towards the realm of ideas rather than facts.
ooh, would a 5 even want to go there?
Well, yeah, they would, because they're, I mean, if you think about an evolved 5 that's curious and inventive, drawing on that intense creative of the 4 is going to leverage that inventiveness and that curiosity.
But what a great match that is. 4 and the 5 on the high performing.
Well, so tell me about the 6. And isn't 6 the most common number we think?
That's what we hear.
Okay.
So,
my poor friend that's a 6 has had to explain herself to me a couple times. Like we talked about, like the way that we interact with each other, and it's not the same as 5, but there's some overlap. So it's interesting.
So with 5, if you think about loyal skeptic, and we'll go there next time, but they are all about protection. They're about, they have a lot of fear. So they're always about overcoming fear, protecting against what they perceive as some threat outside. So the high side of 6 enables the 5 to let go of the need to protect themselves and analyze, and move fully into relationship. The high side of 6 can enable, because what 6s are doing is looking to figure out what's the next shoe to drop, what's the thing around the corner. So that's a sort of a predictive ability. Does that make sense? So think about a 5 who could use more of that, the predictive stuff that's not, these two facts are not together, not connected, but with a little insight and a little bit of predictive quality, I can have a different observation. I can come to a different conclusion. So again, it's just an opportunity to expand the way that they're seeing the world, because fives tend to see the world black and white because there's these facts. These are facts.
Yeah.
This is unknown. So this is white or black, whichever we want to call it. So, and the other thing that sixes are very protective of others. They're very protective of people for the most part. So that's an opportunity for fives to go beyond sort of concepts and intellectual interests, but to include others in their definition of sort of loyalty and what's what has value.
Yeah. Interesting. I'm now seeing why I don't know that many fives. I'm like, oh, I don't do well with black and white thinkers. And I don't do well with people that trade in thinking. That's just
Yeah.
not my strong suit. So I'll have to make it a point to be around some more fives so I can grow up a little bit. So talk to me about stretch and release for fives.
So interestingly enough, where their lines go are 7 and 8.
Ooh, okay.
So 8, let's talk about 8 first.
Yeah.
8 is the release point. So you'll understand this as a 2 who goes to 8 as the stretch point.
Yeah.
8 being power, direction, impact. So an 8 can get released from their stress, the stress of all the thinking. As I think about it, it's like, okay, they decide to take action. They decide to take their internalized thinking to externalized action. And that can release that pin-up stress. It enables them to step into their authority, because what's their authority? Their authority is the wisdom that they have. It's their expertise. They can act more assertively from the standpoint of the 8. Does that make sense?
It does. I'm stumbling a little bit over the energy thing. I'm going,
Yes.
oh, if you've had all these thoughts, you've had all this wisdom, the 8 is your outlet to do something with it and to
Right.
share it in some form or fashion.
Right.
But I would imagine that the 8s are a higher energy number, and so it's interesting that that's a release for them and not a stretch in that way.
Right. So it still may, at the end of the day, they're still only going to have so much energy, but that 8 is going to sort of push them up, like they're going to get higher energy for a time period, and then they may come back.
Because
But
they're
then,
getting the release of sharing the wisdom, and that makes
right, they're going to show up. It says it'll show up more as a presence in the room.
that would be good.
Yeah.
So that was the release was the 8, and the stretch was the 7.
7. Spontaneity, fun, speed, change. Like,
Yeah, I could see that being a stretch.
yeah.
Allow them to connect with other people, really just to get themselves out into the world. Hopefully in a fun, connecting with other people way.
Yeah.
As opposed to being the compartmentalized, quiet, connect with the 7, show up. I've got this expertise. I can sell it here. I can help people here. Go out and express and share their knowledge.
Well, and also think about 7s being, they're sort of known for winging it, like, oh, I'll just try that. Oh, yeah, I can do that, because they've got confidence, and because they just are in this stream of experiences and they're constantly moving towards new stuff. and they're moving towards new stuff, whether they know everything they need to know about that or not. They're just like, okay. So, whereas a 5 can get stuck waiting to know everything about a thing before they, you know, um, think about your brother who is the 7, and it was like, oh, I think I'll just start fly fishing, and he gets some equipment and he does a little bit of whatever, and then he just goes out and does it. Whereas a 5 would be like, I've got to read every book, I've got to watch these videos, I've got to practice, I got to get the fly rod, I got to practice in the house before I go out on the river. They're going to do a lot more stuff. Whereas a 7's just going to be like, oh, let's go try this thing. So there's that would be a stretch.
But it doesn't go well for the 7. They're just going to reframe it. Oh, okay, so this happened. Well, actually, it's this. I'm going to move on to something else. Well, then the 5 could get stuck, be hard on themselves, and have to really dig deep and figure out how come this didn't go right, and it not be fun. Whereas a 7, that's part of the fun. Laugh about it and do something different.
Right.
So if they can, my advice to a 5 would be practice that in an area where you don't have much at risk, where you don't have relationship risk, money risk, audience, wherever you feel risk. Grab something that you don't have a whole lot of an emotional or money investment in, not a big audience. Just don't take it seriously. I'm going to give this a shot. If it don't go well, then I'll, take another shot at it without having to dig deep.
Yeah, it's that idea of sort of winging it, of sort of being exploratory. It can be anxiety producing for 5s.
Yeah, I can see why.
But if they could do it, think about what it would free up for them.
Yeah, it'd be so liberating.
Oh, yeah.
Well, and it's interesting. I could see maybe a shadow side of 5 being like the quote analysis paralysis.
Right.
Like maybe you never make a decision because there's so much things to study.
Yeah.
There's, I don't know, in terms of leadership and like working with organizations, there's a strength to people who can say, okay, like this is the amount of time we have to make the decision. This is the information we have now, and this is the decision we're making.
Right.
Like some things are time sensitive. And so yeah, that I could just see that might be a hard, like I'm thinking about big projects, planning a vacation, like that's kind of a big project.
So I think about 5s as being people who think about university faculty people who spend years researching, and then they get to this level of understanding and then they're researching the next thing. So I suspect there's a number of 5s among university faculty, especially those guys in the labs. I think about guys in science labs. They're just in there doing it, and loving it.
Yeah, okay. Getting there. Well, we've talked a little bit about 5s in relationship and how for somebody like me that's such a feeler, that would be hard. But what does a 5 need from relationship outside of, obviously they need some time to themselves?
I think they also need understanding about their energy level. I think they need and support around that, knowing that that's true for a 5, and then also at the same time helping them navigate so that they can plan for and accommodate and have the energy for social engagement, or for team environments or whatever. So that would be a way that you could support a 5, is being mindful of that and helping them in that process. I think the other thing that, because a 5 may or may not naturally seek opportunities to move into that 8 part, which is the authority part. It's about exercising their wisdom and sharing it, like standing up, giving a report, doing a whatever. So one of the things that other people around them can do is create opportunities for them to share that knowledge and wisdom.
Yeah, I like that.
And then obviously the other thing that we can do for seventh in the right environment with the right
Or five.
issue, fives, is push that seven energy, push that spontaneity. Let's have fun. Let's let's do things fast.
Just let them know that life is messy, that you're not always going to be able to control, or things are not always easily explained. Just learn how to enjoy life and not take things seriously. Encourage them to move and try different things, and then be patient with them. They may take a little longer to. And you don't know what's going on inside of a five because it's so quiet. They may be having a great time and you not know it. Or
they probably don't know they're having a great time because they haven't had time to think about it yet.
That's true.
It's interesting. I was just thinking about a couple that we know.
Yeah.
That she's a 7 and he's a 5. And they were going to go on, they were talking about, they were going to go on a trip. And she goes, oh, we could do X, Y, and Z. And he just looked at her like, and he said, and why would we want to do that?
Yeah.
And she said, and therein is the crux of our relationship.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
Oh man. So I'm thinking about like the idea of, lovingly encouraging someone to move towards their stretch. And for me, I think because I'm self-preservation, it's like, as long as I have that need met, I'm willing to move a little bit at least. I think about somebody else I know where they're an SO, and if you get that outward social need met, they'll be willing to move. And so I'm just wondering in general when it comes to the idea of encouraging somebody to step into their stretch. So we can talk about fives. If you're going to encourage a 5 to move towards 7, is it beneficial to think about their subtype? Like put an SX in a 1-to-1 situation for that stretch?
Well, probably. I mean, anytime you can align with their subtype, people are going to have an easier time unless they're intentionally working on their subtype and then you're combining it with their stretch or their release. But yeah, as a growth step, you'd think, okay, let me see how this person shows up, and then how do I marry their subtype with this sense of spontaneity and fun, or
So how do 5s manage conflict, or do they just not?
Oh, well, it's conflict for them is not about emotions. Conflict for them is about ideas. Who's right and wrong? Who's got the most information? So
they're going to withdraw and study.
Yeah, and then they're just going to come out knowing, oh, well, this is the way this is because this is, I've read all the articles, read all the stuff.
Aren't 1s are the number that have that like moral compass? Like this is what's right. And 5s are black and white thinkers. Are those similar, different? Talk about the difference there.
So I would say 1s are more black, white. They're more right, wronger because they've got that principled, this is the right thing to do. 5s,
so it's coming from like their thinking comes from a moral place.
This is more like this is what truth is. Okay. This is true. This is factual. So that's where I'm talking about right in terms of factual.
Okay.
Ones are right in terms of moral principle. Fives are right in terms of facts,
Got it.
truth,
Okay.
science, data.
Fascinating.
Does that help you make a distinction?
It does. It does. And since one is my wing, I understand a one fairly well. Um, and so when you said black and white, it just triggered that for me, that it's not the same, but it's similar. And yeah,
Right.
trying to find the way in. Because to me, if five just seems so mysterious because they're private, and then because they're thinkers, I don't know how to connect with them. And so
And
yeah,
so we all feel like we have a new five in the family. We don't know for
yes,
sure, but it sure feels like it.
uh-huh,
And so, yeah, different.
yeah, it is different. And I only have a guess about the couple that we know, that's the 7 and the 5,
Uh-huh.
but I'm pretty sure about my guess, and it helps me. I'll go, oh, I didn't realize that about that person, and that makes some things make sense. Um, how do we? So we've talked about a way to kind of love on the fives in relationship, give them time, give them opportunity to share their wisdom, like nudgingly, lovingly, send them towards 7. How do fives show love or give love? Maybe show's the wrong.
I don't have a good answer for that. I'm just going to be honest. I think the fives that I'm in a relationship, they bring me knowledge, or they try to point out uh, things, how my thinking could be better, or I think they try to help me with helpful information, and I think they encourage me to uh, to to be non-attached. I'm not very emotional. I get attached, and I'm thinking the two fives that I know. They say, Dana, you're taking yourself too. I mean, that I think they kind of subtly, very subtly, not, and I'm not, I don't always do well with subtle communication. I do better with blunt, direct
Yeah.
communication. But I think they subtly try to alter my thinking, slow me down, reach out to me what they think if I'm struggling, come see me and talk to me and ask me how I'm doing. Listen, give me a little advice. So that's how the fives that I'm close to in a relationship. Uh,
Well, that's like the idea of a 5 reaching out and checking on you. That's a very generous use of their energy.
Right.
so when they're doing it, I need to pay attention and realize that they are expending a lot of focus on me,
Yeah,
and and it's subtle.
right.
It's not, hey, Dana, come here. We need to talk about this. It's like, oh, Dana, have you thought about da 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 da? And it's short. It's not a long thing. And if I'm in my emotional self, I may not get it. May upon reflection. So that's a really a great question.
You have anything to add about how a 1 would express love?
You mean a five?
Yeah. Yes, I do mean a 5.
Well, I think they, like, I was just thinking about, okay, so if a person needed to do something or needed to make a decision and you brought a five in, they would take it up and do all the research for you and come back to you and say, well, here's, if you're thinking this, and this. Um, and that sort of non-attachment. I don't know. And I think, they're so, there's, they trade so much on data and information that to, I don't mean use them, but to allow them to contribute to you in that way.
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
Sometimes maybe a 5 would come to me and say, Dana, why are you doing this? What are you thinking? What are you, and it's, well, I'm a 9. I'm not thinking.
Yeah.
uh, that is, so just be aware that when this quiet, thoughtful person is paying attention to me, that is the way they're helping.
Yeah.
I don't know that they necessarily know how to help me in that way.
Yeah, I mean, like, I would love to have somebody help me with my thinking. It might not feel like it in the moment, but I could use some help with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, attract a friend that's a 5.
I was gonna say, you could think about, boy, what a combination a 5 and 2 could be in any kind of supportive relationship, because the 2 is going to help a 5 get awareness, comfort with their emotions, and a 5 could help the 2 gain awareness, comfort with their thinking. And they come together around action.
I have learned that I'm not thinking. Like I feel like I'm thinking, but I'm not. So as I've gotten
Didn't you feel I feel like I'm
I
thinking.
know. I know. So
That's funny.
it's so Amy. I don't know about other 2s, but it's so me. But so I like if I'm getting ready to do something that either I haven't done for the first time or it's been a long time or I'm going to have to do it on my own and I don't normally do it on my own, I'll go to my husband. I'll be like, "Help me think this through. Like I'm going to have to do this thing. It's a week from now, but you won't be here. So like let me think it through because I think and it could be something simple like we have the big inflatable water slide, but it's big and it's just me. So like what's the best way for me to get all the water out of that when it's just me at home with the kids? Like help me think that through ahead of time. And then every time I've actually taken that step, I've been really glad that I did. But I'm taking it with another 2. So I need to find some people that are stronger on the thinking side and help me think things through ahead of time.
Well, and also when you think about sort of like your business and your coming finding a 5 who's a thinking partner might bring you some different insights or
Oh yeah, definitely. Definitely. Yeah, the business coach that I had for a while, she's a 4, but she's strong on the 3 and the 5. She, I think her 4 needs some work, but she can do 3 and she can do 5 pretty well. So that was beneficial, absolutely. That outside thinking. Um, well, I would just like to say that if there's anybody that's listening that's a 5 or is in intimate relationship with a 5, I would love to hear from you. Anything we missed, anything we should know, anything we got dead on. I'm really curious just because there's lots of numbers that are very different from me. But the 5 is the first one that's not a wing or a stretch or release that we've talked about. So this is the one that I feel the most like just like a bit mysterious, the least clear about. Yeah. Anything you guys want to add or before we wrap up?
Oh, so
I can't think of anything.
All right. Well, happy day, loves, and I'm gonna bless all the 5s on their way. I hope they have lots of very interesting things to think about, and I hope that they come up with some new ideas for us with all of that information. And yeah, we'll talk to you soon, loves. We'll be back for Loyal Skeptics. Bye. Thank you for listening to the Living Out Love podcast. If this episode was helpful for you, there are 3 ways that you can share the love. You can send this episode to family, friend, neighbor, leave me a rating and review on your favorite podcast platform, or comment and ask questions on YouTube. This season is meant to be interactive. Thanks again for your presence. I appreciate you being here. Talk to you next week, loves.